people want certainty. They want confidence. They're going to follow people who are certain and confident. So if you understand that, I'm not talking about faking it, but be certain like about the expertise that you carry. Like, guys, if you've been doing something career wise, like for at least a year, let's say you've had some good training for 1 year. I guarantee you actually have enough certainty and confidence embedded within you to become an expert to be able to make decisions and take actions in that thing. So don't second guess yourself. Don't doubt yourself. Just take the actions. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. But you know what? Your batting odds will greatly increase if you just take those actions.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. We have with us today best-selling author, entrepreneur, business mentor, speaker, and fellow podcast host, the side hustle millionaire, Tony Whatley. Tony's business and mine are very similar. So why would I have him as a guest, you might be thinking? Well, I'll give you two reasons. One is Tony is a brilliant community builder. I truly admire what he's built. He's a few years ahead of where I'm building, and I've really admired his process, his personality, and his candor. There's enough room for all of us. That's the second reason. Our businesses might be similar, but we are very different people, and we're going to attract a tribe a very different way because of our differences, not our similarities. So, all right, Tony, now that I've told everyone briefly about you can fill in all those gaps for us, because I know there's a lot more to your story than what I've just given the audience.
Man, thank you for the opportunity to come on the show. It's good to connect with you and share this value, because I know that you bring it too. I've watched your content for a while and appreciate what you're doing. They're very straightforward, just like I am. We don't like to do a lot of fluff, and we just kind of keep things real, and that's what we should have in this industry, the personal development and coaching industry. We see too many of these things out there going on that, frankly, kept me from being a part of the industry for about 2 years when I decided to kind of head this direction, because I was afraid of getting lumped in with a bunch of people who are doing these things to get rich quick and get you on this shortcut stuff. And, it just doesn't work out for anybody in long term. And, but my background, I guess, the most interesting things I'd say that I had a dual career, best way to describe it, for about 20 years, where I was really equally driven in my corporate career, where I was a mechanical engineering degree, and I was pursuing oil and gas executive. So I was managing hundreds of millions of dollars in oil and gas, international projects, big scales, a lot of moving parts, time zones, government regulations, all that stuff. Teams of 75 people or so in those corporate settings. And I was looking to try to maybe make a CEO or a vice president, at least at a high level company. And that was my long-term kind of career path. And that was just something that was a separate goal of mine that I'd had for a long time since I graduated college. Now, the other thing is I love cars. I love racing and building cars. And so I built these businesses, which are basically side businesses around my automotive things. And those grew into those massive communities. So I built ls1tech.com, which is the largest General Motors performance community. And that one grew over 300,000 members. And then I also built performancetrucks.net, which it's a truck racing and performance thing. And this is another one that grew to 280,000 registered members. So two massive automotive communities that I built online. And now I'm just doing the same thing with the entrepreneurship space, because that's the other thing I've always had passion with, was building businesses. I started my first LLC in 2001. So just over 20 years now. And those side businesses, even though my corporate career was really a high paying career, I was always earning more in my side businesses.
That's pretty awesome. And maybe it made you had a little easier decision to transition out of the corporate world than some might, but that was going to be my next question anyhow. You had a very successful corporate career in the oil and gas industry. We just talked about you coming to Madison, Wisconsin a few times, but what most would consider, great money for what you were making as that paycheck in that industry. Why leave the comfort of those paychecks for the unknown? Because some people out there right now may be considering that same move. They have this big dream and they're just fearful of that uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that I actually get asked why I didn't leave sooner. Here I was making a side business, and for numbers' sake, I was making about $400,000 a year profit, and that was just my side business. And so
Wow.
most people are like, well, why didn't you just quit that and go full time and turn it up? Well, the reason was is very easy because I was number one in my market share. I had the number one spot in what I was building. So I put the people, the processes, and the systems in place that the company could operate it without me because of my demanding oil and gas career. Sometimes I was remote, I was working offshore, I was in different countries, I was working in Africa and Italy and France and England, and sometimes the Gulf of Mexico. And so I had to build the right processes and systems and put the right people in place to operate this company without me being present. So me quitting to go 8 hours a day into that wouldn't have actually added anything to the bottom line. It actually probably would have increased the costs if I was to pay myself the higher
Right.
salary to be able to do things. So, sometimes if you're number one in your market share and you've built the processes to run on autopilot, essentially, quitting to go add extra hours is not going to add any value. So, I was going to go pursue the executive path. And oil and gas, I was making about 250 a year. So kind of gives you an idea, like, why not just make both? Why not have the time to do it? I have the expertise to do it. I enjoyed it at the time. And yeah, the uncertainty thing comes around, I think, with your income. I think sometimes we tend to get really complacent. From my management positions, I saw that, even in young engineers and project managers, people that are on the support teams, once they crossed about that $10,000 a month mark, they really kind of got complacent. I saw that
Hmm.
some of these people that were like in the 75 to $80,000 range, they were like kicking ass and doing things. They're really aggressive about growth and career. And man, they get about 120,000, and maybe 10% of those people will continue being hungry all the way into the 200 plus range. But I'll tell you, most of them got pretty lazy and lethargic around $10,000 a month range.
I've seen that in the financial advisory world as well, especially as they build a book of business where there's assets under management and fees are coming in every quarter. It
Yep.
becomes cushy and they don't keep pushing the envelope and what made them successful in the first place. But going
Yes.
back to your transition, was there a tipping point? Was there something that you were just fed up with, or was it just a natural progression for you to go, I'm making more over here, I have more passion over here, I'm just going to go full boat?
No, actually, the impact thing it occurred in my 40s. When I turned 40, we start to be a little bit more legacy minded. We start looking back on the things that we could have done a little bit better. I mean, to put perspective and timeline in place here, I sold that company for a couple million back in 2007, had a final exit at 2009, the little transition phase. And so, I've had money for a very long time, and that thing just continued to grow. I started making different investments in different things. And I actually left corporate in 2015. So it was a pretty long while after that because of the industry downturn that was going on in the oil and gas industry in 2015, which really it hasn't fully recovered ever from that era. But also, I started to realize that the larger the company that I worked for, the more that I was just a number. And even though I was making them hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, they didn't really value the people that were putting these projects and things together for them. And when I got through those layoffs, I got to see these people get laid off that were 3 months away from their full pension because they were trying to cut costs. And I was like, this is not how you treat people that have been at your company 20 plus years. Like, that's just terrible. There was many examples of that. And I realized that as I got higher and higher on the org chart, I had to make these tougher decisions. And they didn't really align with my core values anymore. So I really started to see that people were being depleted and used and not really taken care of at the end of their careers. And said, I don't know if I want to be a part of this anymore. So that was just like one stepping stone. And the other one was I was finishing up my project in Africa, and I was going through France to debrief the contractors and sign off on all the final documentation and things like that. And I get the call while I'm still in France that I'm laid off, that's my last day. Like, I'd finished the project, had 2 weeks planned to go in France and do all the final closeouts. I was there about a week. I get a call on a Friday evening at 8 p.m. Okay, over there. And it's my boss like, oh, I forgot to tell you that, today's your last day. Can you go back to the office and turn in your laptop and your phone and your badge? And I said, it's 8 p.m. You want me to get dressed again and go get on a subway and go back downtown to drop? Well, if you could, that'd be really, I really appreciate that. And so again, that was the second example. Like, man, I was trying to take care of my team and they don't even take care of me. It's like that was two strikes there. So I said, you know what? After that, I just extended out my flight and enjoyed the next 2 weeks. I flew my wife over and we hung out in France and toured vineyards and things like that while we're just trying to think about what we wanted to do next. And I just knew that I didn't want to go back to that industry.
That's an amazing story in such a bad way for you, but it ended up being great. The one thing I think about there for those that are in that corporate world is understand they don't have any loyalty to you.
No.
They never will. They will use you until you're not useful anymore, or they deem you're not useful anymore anyhow. So
Yeah.
last thing before we belabor this point too much is, if someone's sitting in the seat listening to this right now, they're in the car and they're thinking about building a side hustle, they're thinking about potentially leaving that corporate world, what advice would you have for that person?
I always tell people to find out what their freedom number is. And, a lot of times
Mm,
people will come to me and they want to start a business or do things like that. And I always tell them, what's your financial goal? And the funny thing is that 95% of the people will give you a financial goal that's actually just a replacement of their current income, because they believe that their current income is their requirement, right? But when you start to really look at what your bills are and the things that you don't really need, like, can you cancel Netflix? Can you cancel some of these other things? They're just really just, they're bleeding slowly, but they're still a cost that you don't really need. Whittle those things away, use an Excel spreadsheet or something, and figure out actually what your monthly costs are. Like, what are the things that you need for your groceries and your commuting and insurance and things like that? And just come up with that number and write it somewhere, maybe on the board, or, hell, go write it on the mirror on a post-it note for every morning you see that, because that's your freedom number. Because as soon as you can start making that number, I would say in a 3-month span, averages around that number, you actually have something that you've created that can really just be that freedom for yourself. And it may not be as high as your current salary, but you start to realize, like, man, I was actually just getting paid a lot, that I didn't need all this. I didn't need 250,000 in salary to be able to do what I do. My freedom number at the time was 7,000 a month. And so I
mm.
said, man, that's actually, I do that with my other side businesses. Like, why am I killing myself and putting all this intention and time into something for a company that will never give me what I truly want? Is was freedom. So understand what your freedom numbers is. Very easy to calculate. Don't think it's your salary, because it's not about replacing what you're currently making.
That's so good. You actually sound a lot like a financial advisor there, Tony. It's pretty good. All right, so switching gears a bit, you are one of the most on-brand people I've ever met. And even today, you're wearing the 365 driven shirt, the hat, you got the light up graphic behind you, which I know is custom metal art, but
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever seen you not wearing at least the hat or the shirt. Why is that so important to you?
Man, here's a good lesson that I actually learned from Grant Cardone at a 10X Growth Con. I think this one was in Miami in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. There was a guy in the front row, and he was, how people have the real fancy belt buckles, like the Hermes or the Louis Vuitton, and then he's got the shirt tucked in behind it so everybody can see his belt buckle. And Grant's up on the stage, and Grant's like, "Hey, man, it's a cool looking belt buckle. I recognize that brand. Very expensive, man. Stand up and tell everybody how much that belt buckle, that belt cost." And he stood up and he's like, "Oh, this is $2,000. He's all proud, because he's VIP and he's got this belt buckle. And Grant's like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." Then he pulls up his shirt. He's got this diamond and ruby encrusted 10X logo belt buckle. And he goes, "You're not legit until you can actually start wearing your brands that you can write off yourself. So sit back down." I was like, everybody in the place was like, damn, like,
Mic
he just
drop.
proved a point. It's just a point, man. Until you actually build a brand and start to be able to build your own clothing and things that you want to wear, you're just still an amateur. I don't care about your Louis Vuitton or your Hermes belt buckle when I actually have my own brand.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it probably limits your decision making as well. Like Steve Jobs always wearing the same shirt every day. Mark Zuckerberg, very similar. You're
Mhm.
wearing your brand every day. It limits that decision making, which helps with not having to fall into the trap of decision fatigue as well.
Yeah. Well, I just like making decisions. I think that, my mom wanted to be a clothing designer and a seamstress. I've always been kind of visual, like artistic, and building things and aesthetics and logos. But it does make the decision making a little easier. But I would say that for me, that's not really a factor. I just want to represent who I am. And you start thinking about, when I started getting on the scene, I thought that these speakers had to wear the sports coat and, and dress businessy, because I came from the corporate world and that's what we did on the presentations. But we get out there and we see people wearing suits, and we see people on the stages in the personal development doing that. And I initially started that way. It's like, well, I guess if I want to be considered a professional, I have to do the same thing. And so you'll see some of my earliest content, even the cover art of my podcast, which I will be rebranding soon. I'm still wearing like a blazer, right? And
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, that's not who I am. Like, you start to realize when you become more confident about who you truly are. I've always been the black t-shirt and a cap guy, and I like my Converse Chucks. And So I'm just going to be me. Like, I don't care about the other stuff anymore. I'm just going to be who I am. I'm a car guy. Like, this is what we joke about. Like, this is the car guy uniform, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, because I came from a suit world as well, in my
Mhm.
previous podcast, I was in a suit every day.
Yeah.
And because I was in the office and I recorded the podcast in the office,
Yep.
I was in a suit, either a shirt, a jacket, something button up, custom made, beautiful. And they're all collecting dust in my closet right now.
I mean, I
So I
love
got
I
beautiful
love
suits.
wearing that. Yeah, I love wearing it when it's required, but I'm not going to do that for my branding anymore. I'm just not.
Yeah. And especially you being the car guy, right? There's a, I've always noticed this interesting dichotomy between blue collar folks and white collar folks.
Mhm.
And there's this interesting, I don't know, I think it comes more from the blue collar side where they look badly upon those in the suit, whether it's in the construction industry, the car industry. It's like you're always seemed as salesy
Mm.
or uppity, whatever it might be. So if you're appealing to the blue collar crowd, they expect you to be in a t-shirt. If I was
Yeah,
appealing to a bunch of lawyers as a financial advisor, I better show up in a suit.
yeah.
So
Or
being on
maybe you
brand.
don't. Maybe you disrupt it. Maybe you show up normal and they're wearing a suit and they go, "Hey, this guy is actually himself and he's got a lot more confidence. He's not here to kiss our ass. Like, maybe this is
Yeah.
the guy we actually need to work with." So be yourself. That's the way I say it. But yeah, know your audience, but also be yourself, because I coach small business owners. They're not sitting around at their mom and pop stores with their suit on. They're not coming to these conferences with their suit on. It's like, know who you're speaking to. That's a great point you brought up.
Yep. And what does 365 driven mean? I want everyone to know your brand a little bit.
365 driven is it, it's just really improving every single day. That's the best way to think about it. And it's not about hustle and grind. And because a lot of times people are out there what I call hustle porn. They're like, "Oh, you got to 365, you got to go a 7 day, 12 hours a day, you only need 3 hours of sleep." Like, they're just crazy, man. Like, I'm actually very process and system and people driven, where I don't want to have to work. If I can make millions of dollars and not work 1 hour a day, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to think that, this whole mentality of putting in the extra hours and working the three jobs and crushing OT and all the stuff that I grew up with is how we defined ourselves as a man, is how we're successful. Like, you're not working 12 hours a day, you're a weaker human. Like, no, you're just not good at what you do. That's
Yeah.
what I think.
Yeah, that's very true. I coached a financial advisor that's set a bunch of records early on. And everyone would come up to me and ask, how's he do it? Is he working more? Is he seeing more? Is he working 12 hours a day? I said, no. In fact, he works probably less than most. He'll keep
Mhm.
5 to 6 meetings before noon, but he starts at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
with his meetings, not his day, his meetings. And then he wants to be able to do what he wants to do in the afternoon.
That's it, man. The problem with most people, especially business owners, is that we use technology to hack time. We do shortcuts. We do things that are automations. We have all these apps that increase productivity. We do all this stuff, but then we get that free time. And what do? We make the mistake of backfilling that free time with more work. So we are literally compressing 3 or 4 days worth of work nowadays into what we use as an 8 hour day. And it's just, that's what creates the burnout and the stress and the anxiety, all these different things that we just try to avoid. So I think about these productivity hacks and technology. I love those things. But if you want to make yourself happier, backfill that free time that you've created, that you've earned, with things that you enjoy.
Yes, great advice. So, what advice do you have for those trying to build a brand right now?
Man, that's a tough one. I think that understanding well, for me, I always think about where's the audience? Like, who am I serving? It's not about me. Like, I think a lot of times people think that their brand is more of a follower based business model, but I'm a community leader. There's a difference. And
Mm-hmm.
I can elaborate a little bit on the difference there, but a follower based business model, like you see on Instagram or TikTok, or even some levels on Facebook, is a one way conversation. It's about, "Hey, I'm at the top of this mountain and I'm super awesome. And you guys are here because I'm super awesome. And it's all about me and what I'm thinking." And a lot of people think like that. Unfortunately, it's ego based centric, right? And so a community leader has nothing to do with trying to be the top of the mountain and pounding their chest and how awesome they are. They're trying to facilitate very strong bonds between the members themselves. So think about a community leader as building a virtual bar, so to speak, where everybody shows up and they recognize their friends and they keep coming to hang out because that's where their friends are hanging out. Has nothing to do with the bartender or who owns the bar. It's being the facilitator of conversations and bonds. And that's what I do. So the automotive thing, I built these events out around the country. I go to the hotbeds where all the racing was going on. I have these hosted events, get people off of their keyboards. They come out, they meet people, they shake hands, they race each other, they talk a little trash, have a little fun, shake some hands, drink some beers, and they go back to their keyboards as good friends now. They've built these unique bonds. It didn't have anything to do with me, right? And so I think about how do I do that is just 365 driven as an entrepreneurship community. I'm there to facilitate bonds between them. I want those people to become family. I want them to become best friends. I want them to go to the events, meet other people that are just like them, different parts of the world, and come back online and go, hey, this is where we met. We're going to keep coming hanging out there. So that's what I think about the community versus the influencer or the follower type thoughts.
Well, that's a great analogy in general because true leaders are leading from behind, not
Yeah.
trying to pull people or bark at people on the way down. So that's great. You've talked about authenticity already, which I love in branding. And what I love about you is you're not afraid to post controversial stuff, whether it's politics, talk about oil and gas, talk about some of the hot topics, Bitcoin, I've seen you kind of talk about a little bit. So what would you say to those that are scared to broach that topic and not be their true self and not voice their opinions because they're scared of some backlash on Facebook?
Well, I think that it's a comfort level that I've earned over, man, I started online in forums since 1996. So anybody that wants to Google me or go find stuff that I've been posting, I've been consistently doing that for a very long time. And owning a different communities with hundreds of thousands of members, you can imagine the ego and the levels of
Mm-hmm.
expertise that trolls, like expert level trolls, like I'm friends with some of them now, but man, these guys are really good at getting people riled up and, just emotional and triggered, things like we say now. And I got really good at diffusing them and understanding how to handle them. It's just a bullying thing for most people, right? And if you remove the way of them to be able to laugh at you by using self-deprecating humor yourself and laughing yourself, and they're going to be like, "Damn it, this guy's not getting emotionally triggered." And if you watch some of those exchanges, well, I would say most of those exchanges where I post things like that, I'm very good at making the troll eat themselves and delete their own responses because they realize like they're messing with the wrong person who is very good at understanding psychology and emotions, and I'll make them implode on themselves. And it's kind of fun. It's comic value to me. Like it's like you just thought you were a good troll. You're actually like a level 3 out of 10. Like go back and regroup, go get it a little bit better, then come back and try again. Like, and
Go back to
they do
troll
this. And
school.
dude, it happened even over the weekend. We're hiking this mountain. I get notified that somebody mentioned my name on a friend's post, and it's this lady, and she's like just going full emotional on me, and like, I don't even know how rich you are. I think you're a fake millionaire because I can't find your net worth on Google, and you don't have a blue check mark, and like it's all this stuff, and everybody's laughing at her, and other people started just jumping in and laughing at her too, and she finally went back and just deleted all of her own responses, which mission accomplished. See, it's like we don't have to call names, we don't have to get into character attacks because I don't do that because I realize that that's the loss of a debate when you do the character assassination or call somebody names. Like you just
Yeah.
lost because you have no ammo, no substance, no depth. So the controversial topics you talk about, how do you get around the fear? Man, it's a comfort level and it's a confidence thing because unlike most people that just regurgitate headlines, I actually do the research. I'll read something, and if I'm interested in it, I'll go down the rabbit hole and I'll do my hours of research and understanding both sides, and I'll make my opinion. And it's not always like the political left or the political right because I consider myself in the middle, but I'm very pragmatic and logical. So I just look at the logical things and I look at the data and the facts. I'm a numbers guy, and I share the facts and the numbers. And then if they want to get emotional about that, I'll just keep burying them in the facts and the data. And soon enough, like their emotion just kind of runs out of ammo, and then they start doing the name calling and things like that, right? So if you're afraid of doing that because you're worried about your job, I can understand that. But here's the other thing: you chose that job, you chose
No.
that career. So if you decide that you want to go work for some company or create some kind of company where you can't actually be yourself, that is your choice to do that. So don't blame it on like, well, I got to do it to maintain my job. No, you actually can do that because every example that you can think of, there's somebody out there that is very polarizing, doing the exact same career that you have, and I guarantee they're probably even more successful than you.
Yep.
So there's no reason not to be yourself other than just being scared.
And they may be scared of not having the knowledge, right? They're sharing a meme and don't have the
Yeah.
facts to back it up, right? So if you're
Yeah.
going to share a meme, do it for comedic value, but also
Yes.
be able to be prepared to back it up. And that's why I shared your post about why gas is the price that it is, because I
Mm.
knew you had 25 years of knowledge and data to back that up, and you listed out all the reasons. And so, like, even if someone had posed a good question, I tagged you and said, I didn't have the information. I'm like, hey, but my friend Tony does. And you had a great response.
Nobody wants to hear the real answers, though. I mean, that thing went viral. I mean, I think that the thing had like thousands of shares just off of my normal Facebook post. It wasn't a business page or anything. It's just my assessment of the industry watching for the last 2 years. And I laid out the facts, and nobody wanted to hear that. They're like, "Oh, I disagree because the CNN told me this, and MSNBC told me this, and even times Fox like tells you the wrong thing." Like, I think all mainstream media is garbage, both sides. So
Mm-hmm.
don't think I'm on your side if you're listening to this. I think they're all garbage because they're manipulating the audience of their choice. They'll
Correct.
tell you the wrong thing many times, and you start talking about the industry insiders, and it's funny because people will try to debate you. They have zero like experience in this because they're just headline regurgitators, and then they quickly learn like, actually, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. They have answers, and they go again. They go delete their responses because they realize they just stepped into the wrong ant bed.
Yeah, that's great. So, for those looking to build their own communities, be it blogs, social media, or in personal networking, you said you've been in the game since '96, which is amazing because that seems to be like, well, it is pre Facebook, it is pre all the social
Mhm.
media stuff. So, where did you get your start? And follow up questions are like, where did the gasoline get poured on that fire?
Man, I think that I've always been a leadership person. I think it's a personality thing. Even as a kid, I was the leader of my friends' circles, and I've always been decisive. I think that's one of the things that I admire, even in other leaders, because although you can be a leader, you still have to be a good follower to people who have a little bit more experience and understand who those leaders are. And even in corporate, one of the things that always drove me just batty, just things I could not stand about fake leaders, is lack of decision. Like when you have a meeting just to talk about, well, we'll just have another meeting next week and decide next week. Like, no, let's decide today based on the information and the data that we have presented to you today. Let's make a decision and realize that every decision is not a final decision. You can actually get to a second decision. Maybe a month from now, we'll have two different decisions. Like you may even go back to the original decision, but make a decision. And so, when someone's like, hey, where do you want to eat? Like, make a decision. Someone's like, hey, where do you want to go? Make a decision. Like, quit training yourself to prolong these things and think about like, well, just put it off and somebody else will do it. Like, you know what? Yeah, somebody else will do that. We call them the leader. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be the leader, like make the decisions and actually take the actions. And so few people are willing to do that because they just don't want to hurt feelings, or it's just weird, like human interaction thing. Like, just make a decision, man. It's not that hard. It's not life ending. Just go do something.
Well, I think that's self doubt, imposter syndrome that we all see and experience at some time.
Yeah.
And we just got to get through it and seek out people like whether it's you, me, mentors, books, podcasts,
Mhm.
whichever can help you, maybe counselors or psychologists, whatever, to
Right.
get you past to the
Yeah.
next piece of your life that your dream is really destined to be in. So,
You've been
what,
you've been in sales. You
yeah,
understand this. Like it's certainty. People want certainty. They want confidence. They're going to follow people who are certain and confident. So if you understand that, I'm not talking about faking it, but be certain, like about the expertise that you carry. Like, guys, if you've been doing something career wise, like for at least a year, let's say you've had some good training for 1 year, I guarantee you actually have enough certainty and confidence embedded within you to become an expert to be able to make decisions and take actions in that thing. So don't second guess yourself. Don't doubt yourself. Just take the actions. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. But you know what? Your batting odds will greatly increase if you just take those actions.
that's right. So, if someone's looking to build that community, be it in, I don't know, one of my favorite things, cigars, could be
Mhm.
cars, could be purses, whatever community they're trying to be in with something they're passionate about. And where would you start, whether it be online, whether it be blogs, TikTok? What I know you're not a big TikTok guy, but any of those things that you would say, this is where I would start to build that tribe, to build that bar like environment.
I think in current times, if you want to build a community, you have to utilize the tools that we have available that we didn't always have available before. I mean, think about this. If you wanted to be famous 20 years ago, you had to be in movies or TV. There was gatekeepers and you had to do all that stuff to get to that level. If you wanted to be known as a news person, you had to be on the local or national news. Like you had all these different things that were available back then. And then social media and blogging and things like that came out, and it was a wave of influencers and people that built their name around those. And those are still viable, but less viable than currently. So then videos came out. We see YouTube, like the influencer waves that
Mm-hmm.
come from that, and podcasts. You and I are doing a podcast. There's waves that came from that. Live videos and live streams and live events, like these things have a different way of creating ripples in that pool of becoming an authority or someone that's an influencer in that space. And the thing is I see a lot of people that want that result, but they're not willing to do the work or invest in themselves to get the skill.
Yeah.
So if you want the things that are working the best now are videos, and podcasts are always going to be popular because it's essentially replaced drive time radio with
Yep.
opinions from people that you want to know. They didn't have to get a job at some radio station and like fake, the whole like fake morning talk stuff. Like we all listened to it before we were commuting, but we didn't have anything else to listen to. And like, oh, look at the Houston Astros. They're doing really good today. Oh yeah, they sure are. Like all this fakery talk, right? The DJ speak, right? And so nowadays podcasting is just more authentic and more real. People prefer that. They talk about a little bit deeper conversations that they couldn't talk about on the radio, right? It's things that were censored, so there's a lot less regulation in the podcasting world, that people enjoy those conversations more, and that's why it's doing well. So understanding what the hot ticket is, maybe it's TikTok. If you have 0 followers right now and you know that you need to go build followers right now, I would say TikTok or LinkedIn are your 2 best bets. They have the
Mm-hmm.
highest organic reach. They're going to see, most people are going to see your post. As long as you connect and build those audiences, those are the fastest 2 places right now. I would say TikTok's number 1. Now, if you've already been around, maybe Facebook, you've got an audience, or Instagram, you've got an audience, or you're kind of growing that, just pour on the fire, man. You have to use that every single day. Again, 365 driven, like my brand. Show up every single day, create some content, make people laugh, make people feel good. Think about how can I educate them? How can I inspire them? How can I entertain them? I think a lot of times people forget the entertaining part, but you guys understand that anytime you're on a microphone, anytime you're on a camera, anytime you're on a stage, anytime you're writing something, you have to be an entertainer. You have to entertain people to keep their audience. You have to entertain them so much that when they see your name or a video pop up, they're going to go watch it again because you entertained them last time.
Yep.
So invest in the skills. And guys, I had stage fright. I didn't like being on camera. I didn't like to do any of this stuff. As soon as like 2017, I did not like to do this stuff. But I realized that the importance of doing that and investing in myself to gain those skills and that confidence to do that, I hired a speaking coach. I joined Toastmasters, which is a public speaking organization, nonprofit, really inexpensive, $45 for 6 months, like really inexpensive. You show up every week, you participate, you raise your hand, you get uncomfortable. They give you awareness because they tell you how you can improve, and you just do the reps. And I did that by doing videos every single day for over a year. So again, 365 driven, showing up every day to get a little bit more confidence, a little bit more comfort in these skills. And now I stand on stages with thousands of people in the audience. So these things are things that you can learn, but you have to realize the importance and understand that, hey, I still have to be an entertainer. You want some more of that? I've been in improv comedy school for the last year because I realized that, I've been public speaking for about 5 years. How can I enhance that? How can I improve that? Well, comedy. I like to make people laugh. So I enrolled in improv comedy school. So I'm wrapping up a year of training in that. So always add to your skills and be willing to make yourself very uncomfortable, because improv is very uncomfortable because you don't get to be yourself. Your character gets assigned by the person on the stage.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, how are you doing? It's good to see you, you 85-year-old grandpa. Like, then you have to act like an 85-year-old grandpa. Like you're assigned a character. So that's not comfortable for people, right? So always be investing in your entertainment value. And that's how you get people to keep coming back.
So that's awesome. I want everyone to capture this. This is a former mechanical engineer, right? Engineers, accountants are not known to be entertaining, not known to be public speakers. They're more introverted. And I know I'm generalizing here, but I want people to realize that he went from being introverted, highly intellectual, focused on the numbers, focused on the reports, doing deals, to now in 2017 being vulnerable enough to go into a room, pay $45 a month, or it wasn't even a month, it was a year, right?
For it was a year. Yeah, 6 months. 6 months. $90 a year is what that costs.
Which is crazy. And you implemented the lessons you were learning for 365 days on video to get masterful at your craft.
Yes.
After making millions of dollars.
Yeah, decade after that.
So this is awesome. I want everyone to understand that you need to continue to grow, you need to continue to build, and Tony's a great example of that.
I
So any
appreciate that.
mistakes or pitfalls you had while building these communities that might help some people?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake I observed, which we caught pretty soon, was removing toxic people from your community. I think that it's a hard thing for most people to do, especially if you're a people pleaser or you're an empath like I am. We are. You are. You wouldn't care. You wouldn't be doing a show if you didn't care about people. You have to remove toxic people from your community. Imagine like 300,000 car dudes. Like, you don't think that you're going to get some egos and violent threats and like
Yeah.
people talking stupid trash and like, I'm going to come to your house. And guys, if you create, let's say the virtual bar, let's use that same analogy. If you create the virtual bar, just like a regular bar, and you love that bar, they got the best drinks, all your friends are there, they got some video games and stuff, they got the big screens, like you love this place. it, you're not going to go act a fool in that place and get tossed out or banned from there because you like that place. The value's there. The value that you created is there. So just like your communities, if the value is there and they're getting stuff that they enjoy and it's not costing them a lot, but they're showing their ass and they're doing something stupid, you got to get rid of those people. You just basically create the rules, the core values, things that you dictate to govern the rules, and you go, this is the rules. And if you do this, like you're out, like we're just going to kick you out. And then they start to see examples of people getting kicked out and they go, oh, I just won't cross that line. I like this place too much. I like the people here. Like I'm not going to do that. So you go to these different communities. Like I'll see people like bragging about the number of people in their community. Like let's use Facebook groups. That was the most prevalent right now, right? They'll say like I got 100,000 people in my Facebook group. I'm super awesome, and then you go join that group because they invite you, and you see 50% of the people just talking shit to each other and trolling and just being assholes. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
why would I want to participate in a community like this? Like, you got half the people there not even liking the people that run the group. They're like, this guy sucks, and I don't see anybody that getting removed because that vanity metric of 100,000 people in my group is more important to them than actually having an actual legit community of actually contributing people that want to actually be there. So get rid of those people because what happens is the people that have the knowledge, the people that have the experience, the people that actually would share real value in that group, we're just going to hide in the shadows. We're going to watch all the shit show go on. We're not going to reply. We're not going to help because we don't want people trolling and just being assholes to us. Like, why would I do that? Like, I have the information. I can actually literally answer that. You're going to have 12 people jump in and talk trash. Like, why would I even want to like post the answer? So by removing the toxic people from your community, it's going to open up the place where the people that actually have the information, the people that actually have the experience are going to want to participate and collaborate.
Yeah, I want everyone to capture that. If you keep those toxic people, the value gets diluted, right? If you boot those toxic people, the value gets elevated. So that's
Yeah.
a great lesson.
Yeah. It reflects in your leadership too. If you air quotes lead a group that's got, I don't care how many members, but it's all trash, like you're a trash leader. I hate to tell you.
Yep, I agree. So, how are you keeping yourself at the top of your game? I know you've talked about improv, you talked about Toastmasters, you're continually growing. We're both part of Arte Syndicate. Is there any other ways that you're growing right now to make sure that you're at the top of your game to continue influencing all these business leaders that you're coaching and helping?
I think that the problem most people face is they don't embed their mind with new information on a daily basis. So part of my daily routine is reading every day. Really, the last 30 minutes of the day, I'll lay in bed and I'll actually read a physical book. Now, while I'm driving or I'm at the gym, I actually listen to audiobooks and podcasts. I'm always learning something. So I call that my learn and burn session, right? Like me getting out of the house because we both work at home. My wife is in real estate. We go to the gym to get out of the house. That's like our commute for the day, right? And I put the earbuds in. I'm not listening to music. I can hear the background music in the gym. It's very loud, but I'd rather listen to audiobooks and podcasts and things that I can learn while I'm actually working out. And so, as much as I love music, I've replaced all of that time with learning things. And I think that a lot of times people will come to you and like, hey, how do you come up with this content? Like, I want to create a YouTube channel. I want to create a podcast. They know they want to do something, but their big objection that they have is like, how do I come up with ideas? It's like if you don't have ideas, it's because you're not learning something new every day. Because if you were, you will have these aha moments. You'll have new perspectives. You'll have different things that you thought that you knew maybe a year ago that you don't agree with nowadays because you've gained a new perspective or you've learned something new or a little bit more detail behind it. You go, you know what? I thought about that. Like So you will always have new ideas for content as long as you're learning new things every day.
No, I agree. And as I said, I'm a little bit newer to this train as far as development and posting myself more on the social media sense and giving more of myself. Every morning I'm reading at least 10 pages. That started with the 75 hard journey. And I've always been a good reader, but now I'm reading on purpose to be like, what's resonating with me more today that I could also talk about with my tribe? And so if you're reading or listening to something, just kind of bookmark that either in your head, take a screenshot, whatever it might be, and that will give you your thought train to be able to write about it on social media or your blog post or whatever later.
Yeah, I actually use Evernote, the app on my phone. And if I'm listening to an audiobook or a podcast and an idea comes to me, I'll just pause it and I'll go to the Evernote, which is kind of like a notepad, really is all
Mm-hmm.
it is. And I'll just jot down the notes inside there of what I heard and who it's from. And, that way I kind of have a reference point of it. And then I'll just continue listening.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, one of your quotes that I love is when we fear uncertainty, we cannot visualize our future or our potential. Tell us more what that means to you and how do people break themselves of that thought train?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that one because I think a lot of times people really fear the uncertainty and what's to come. The thing is we don't know what's going to come, and the fear of the unknown is a real thing, right? So a lot of times people, we talked about earlier about staying in your career because you want the air quote steady paycheck. That's like the certainty kind of thing that you believe is certainty. But I think after the last 2 years, when we saw how the government can tell you like you're essential or non-essential, that kind of really shows you that you're not as certain as you think you are with your job. Like,
Yep.
now other thing about your employment, it was when you're working for a company, realize that your employment is only one decision away from not existing. And it ain't
Or one
always your
relationship.
decision. Yeah. Your boss has a bad morning with his wife. He comes in a bad attitude. He takes it out on you. He fires you for the day. And that's not your decision, but there's your certainty. There's your steady paycheck that you think is so certain. Now, from an entrepreneurship perspective, you actually have different ways to get around issues like that where you go, hey, you're going to call me non-essential, cool, I have a way to get paid, I have a merchant account, I have a bank account, I have people with a good staff, I'll just regroup and reposition my company to go create some kind of revenue in a slightly different space while we can kind of manage and get through this time. So understand you have more options when it's your company and when it's your business versus being an employee. So think about this is like whatever you're at right now, if you're trying to improve and become a better version of yourself, that's uncertainty because we don't know where we're going to be in a year. We would like to have things planned. We'd like to visualize ourselves in 3 to 5 years, and that's good. Do those things, but understand that's still rooted in the future. It's still rooted in uncertainty. Sometimes those opportunities that you know that will happen, you don't know where they're going to happen. You don't know who they're going to come from or when they're going to happen. So that's all uncertainty. So you got to be really excited about what's unknown. Like I get excited about tomorrow. Like the past is the past. We can look back on that on lessons and things like that. But if you're just stuck where you're at and you're listening to this, understand that you got to be a little bit more like embrace what's uncertain and not fear what uncertain. Get excited about the future, and that's where everything's going to be improving in your life.
Yeah. And you're never going to fully know. That's the thing. And if you're a religious person, you need to know about faith, or you should know about faith already.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, just understand that you're never going to fully know. And you got to bet on yourself at some point.
Yeah, you're
So
definitely.
you and I are both coaches. I've had amazing coaches. I've had terrible coaches. I'm sure you've had the same. What is your belief in who should have a coach and what should they be looking for?
I think that we all need coaches. I think at every level. I mean,
Agreed.
think about this. When I was working, even in the corporate level, I'm working for Fortune 100, top 100 of the 500, right? And I started to notice that the executives had multiple coaches. Like I was friends with some of these vice presidents, like at Chevron and things like that. These guys had speaking coaches. These guys had, business coaches. They had financial coaches. They had some of these guys had 3 or 4 coaches. And I'm thinking like, wow, like that's how you do it. And I remember really being just admiring somebody's speaking ability one time. And I was probably in my late 20s. And I was like, man, you're a really naturally gifted speaker. And he's like, no, I'm not. He goes, I actually hired a speaking coach and I worked with him for a year and a half. And
Hmm.
that's why I can do this. And so I realized like, okay, this is how successful people think. So when you're broke, or let's say you're middle class, like I grew up, both of those, right? anytime you come up with a challenge, we think about how am I going to solve this? How am I going to fix this? How am I? It's always like, how am I? How am I? Successful people think, who do I know that can solve this? It's always about who, like who knows this answer? Who can get me there? Who can I hire to get that result? Who do I need to hire to take this off my plate? It's always like the who is the answer versus the how.
Yeah.
And when I started to make that shift, probably about 15 years ago, I started to realize like every problem or challenge that we have is not unique. There's been thousands, if not millions, of people before us that have had that same problem, whatever the problem is. Like, there's no unique problems. Why are you not using the people's resources and knowledge to get that answer and get you past that so you can move on to the next challenge?
So good. So what they should be looking for, because you and I both know there's some crap out there as well. We'll put that nicely.
Yeah.
What should they be looking for in a coach?
Yeah, be careful of the coaches out there that are really transactional in relationships. I've seen this too many times, especially in this space. It's really kind of disgusting, to be honest. And you'll find these people because they don't really support you until you pay them. And then they basically shut off the valve and they quit engaging and supporting you when you're no longer paying them. So that's a very transactional relationship. Like,
Yeah.
you're only going to get their attention in the window of you cutting them the first check and then sending them the last check. Now, the thing about that, good coaches will support you no matter where you are, whether you're before hiring you, while you're hiring and then after you're hiring. And that's because they actually care. They're not worried about transactional relationships. They're actually looking for long time relationships that will last decades. Now, to give an example of this, when I first launched my mastermind groups, those are 6 to 8 people in each. I put out a little application and I said, hey guys, I'm going to start these mastermind groups. Apply here and we'll kind of see if you're a good fit. And then I'll build the groups around the information that you share. It's a questionnaire essentially. Guys, I had 2 of these people that joined that were staff members of mine 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I
Mm.
helped both of them build 7-figure companies. I mean, they're mid 7-figure company business owners, and they said, hey, I want to get to the next level. And one of them was like, I want to sell my business. They came back to me 20 years later to hire me as their coach. And it blew me away because I didn't expect that. I didn't
No.
expect that my old audience was like going to be my current client list. And you don't get that by looking at transaction relationships. Now, the other question I think about is, was this person really successful before they became a coach? Because there's a lot of people out there, including New York Times bestsellers and influencers and things like that. I'm not going to mention any names, but a lot of people only became successful as a coach or as their book blew up. But they're trying to teach you about prosperity and success and things like that. It's like they can't teach you to get there because they never got there until they started teaching other people how to do it. So always do the Google search, always figure out what their background is, start to understand what their core values are, understand that, yeah, people can improve and change, but sometimes people don't. Sometimes people just hide it a little bit better. So always do your due diligence and don't just join the cool kids group that all the cool kids are growing. And you mentioned Arte Syndicate. Those are Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. I've known Andy for a while, car guy. I followed him on forums. We chatted and things like that. I've admired him as a businessman because he built First Form. You're wearing his shirt right now. He's a
Yeah.
very successful businessman. Him and Ed both made net worths of hundreds of millions of dollars before they decided to even coach. Like, they didn't need our money. They literally don't need our money. Like, the money that we do pay them is like it's a drop within a drop within a drop of a big bucket. And so they don't need our money. It's a different perspective. And it's like, okay, these are the people that actually do care because they don't have to do this, right? So understand that there are people out there like that. And the problem with this is that the people that do have the money, the people that do have the experience, people that have achieved things like you and I have, there's actually very few of us that are actually willing to go coach and teach people. Like, there's not that many people out there sharing real success. And so that's where I said, you know what, that's the gap that I need to go fill because people do need to understand what I've helped people do. And I've had 12 of my former staff members I've built in 7 and 8 figure businesses for over the last 20 years. And they were always telling me, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. But I had all the convenient excuses why I shouldn't, like, oh, I got a family and I got a full-time job and I'm running businesses. And what I was really saying is, like, I was scared to put myself out there. I didn't want to be on camera. I did
Yeah.
a very private life. I was like, I don't want to put myself, it's like, I don't like public speaking. Like, all the fears that I had were, just really showing up as the excuses of why I wasn't doing it. So I realized, like, hey, if I'm going to make real impact in this world, create legacies, not for just my clients, but their children and their grandchildren, I need to get over the fear and understand that my purpose is stronger than my fear. And that's when I started investing in myself.
Yeah, that's really good, Tony. The only thing I would add is that make sure that you want to emulate their life as well. Like
Yes.
they've been there, done that. Like Tony's been there, done that. Sold companies for millions of dollars. I've been there, done that. Sold a couple different companies, have coached many people, managed over 200 people. I got into it because I've taken some lumps, and I want to be able to help business owners alleviate some of those hurdles and lumps, because it is a lonely, hard road as a business owner, and I want to make it a little bit easier. That's my motivation.
Good for you, man. I mean, that's what we should be really worried about is making sure we take care of the people that are investing in us. And it's a personal relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. Do I cost money? Absolutely. But it's not because of the money.
That's right. It's because of the value and the giving back and the legacy that you want to leave. Yeah. Amazing.
That's right.
Well, you really answered my last question, which was about the leaders, not abandoning people, because it's not just coaches, it's leaders. If you're a leader, all the people that are still in my old firm, I still love and respect. I still give them advice pretty much daily. I get a call. So still love to talk to them. We'll still pour into them. Just because, I'm not there doesn't mean I'm not present with them. Yeah. So I want to respect your time. I know we're at the top of the hour. The biggest thing that I want people to do is follow Tony from this. I want you to share this episode. I know there's a ton of value. Tony, where can they follow you? We'll have it on the show notes as well, but talk about it right here.
Yeah, I'll keep it easy. I put all my social, the book, the podcast, which is also called 365 Driven. Everything's on my website at 365driven.com.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes as well. But I know you found value in today's show, so please subscribe, share it incessantly. And until next time, remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Inspire and impact. See you next time.